Sarawak is mostly known for its traditional tribal crafts and cultural heritage, especially that of the Ibans, who make up the biggest single ethnic group in the state. Therefore, one would usually associate Sarawak with the sounds of the sape, the ngajat dance, and the beautiful traditional beads and basket weaving, the tattoo traditions, and of course the beautiful Pua Kumbu textiles. Which makes one be surprised as to why many would actually not realize the existence of the crafts and traditions of the second largest ethnic group of Sarawak, the Malays. The Sarawak Malays are not unlike their brethren from the peninsula of Malaysia, yet in many ways they have their own culture and traditions, which include their very own unique rendition of the Songket fabric. Whilst many would associate the Malay Songket with that from the peninsular states of Terengganu and Kelantan, those in the know would actually inform you that the Songket of Sarawak is on par with their cousins from the peninsular fabrics. For many, the Sarawak Songket are more beautiful, more intricate, and also more valuable. For the discerning collector, the differences between the Sarawak Songket and the Peninsular Songket are vast. However, the one main difference that the Sarawak Songket proudly has is that the finished cloth is reversible. Both sides of the cloth can be used at any time. We would also need to understand the history of the Sarawak Songket to realize the fabric's illustrious history, which was made popular even in the West by Margaret Brooke, the former illustrious Rani of Sarawak. In her memoirs, the Rani penned these words, talking of these sarongs and the wonderful cloth manufactured by the women of Sarawak. It always surprised me when I consider, given the idea that Sarawak was such an uncivilized country when the first Raja went there, and that its people were sunken in a state of barbarism, how it was possible that the womankind of the Malay population living in the place evolved the marvelous embroideries and brocades that nearly all the women of Sarawak are capable of weaving. The Rani was of course referring to both the two main fabrics that she discovered when she became Sarawak's first Rani or Queen. The fabrics she was referring to was obviously the Sarawak Songket and the Keringkam shawl. Through this episode, we will acquaint ourselves with these two wonderful fabrics of Sarawak and rediscover its glory as a unique tradition of the Sarawak Malays. The true original woven Sarawak Songkets may be one product that cannot be easily found in the cities of Sarawak, including Kuching. However, with the opening of the new Sarawak Craft Bazaar along the Kuching waterfront area, one can easily see this magnificent fabric. Here we are fortunate to meet a young entrepreneur who is fast becoming one of Sarawak's top Songket maker, Miss Ramtini Waiti.
Saya bermula dalam tenunan Songket ni pada usia 20 tahun lagi, di mana saya bermula belajar di Pusat Kraftangan Malaysia, Cawangan Kuching, dan di sana saya menimba ilmu selama 9 bulan. Dan selepas itu saya balik kampung dan mendapat tawaran bekerja di Yayasan Tuanku Nur Zahirah dan Tanoti House. Dan pada 2013 saya berhenti bekerja dan balik ke kampung dan mula membuat tenunan Songket di kampung Gedong dan mencari tempahan sendiri di sekitar kampung dan Kuching. Pada 2015, saya membuat sebuah syarikat saya yang saya beri nama sebagai Seri Gedong Songket, di mana Gedong tu adalah nama simbolik untuk kampung saya, iaitu Gedong. Seri Gedong yang telah saya pun tubuhkan ni, keunikan dia adalah di mana setiap produk ataupun setiap hasil kain yang saya ciptakan akan ada satu motif yang saya panggil maskota. Motif maskota itu pada setiap kain yang ada di Sarawak yang dah beratus tahun usianya. Jadi saya fikir saya ambil satu motif tu dan saya jadikan satu brand Dan saya panggil sebagai mahkota. Mahkota itu adalah mahkota yang bersalut dengan emas.
According to Ms. Ramtini, making a single complete fabric measuring 2 meters by 5 meters takes between 3 to 6 months, depending on the patterns, motifs, and the overall complexity of the design. At her Sri Gedong factory, located about an hour's drive from the capital city of Kuching, all her handmade fabrics are manually produced, strictly using the traditional method. The traditional method, whilst not economical, is preferred, as this maintains the integrity of the craft and the authenticity of the Sarawak Songket. There are many steps required to complete a piece of Songket fabric, especially using the traditional Songket weaving process brought down over generations. The journey of making the Songket begins with the mewarna process, or colouring or dyeing process, whereby the threads are coloured using natural dyes. This process is quite time-consuming as care is taken to ensure proper colouring and consistency are achieved. The dyeing process may take 2 to 3 weeks to complete. The second step is the menerai process, which roughly translates to winding the dried threads into the bobbin or the peleting in Sarawak Malay. This is followed by the mengganik or the warping process. During this stage, the threads are painstakingly counted and measured by hand on the warp or the warping frame before the next step can begin. This is then followed by the menggulung or wrapping step, whereby the threads are rolled and wrapped over a beam or a plank tautly before being installed in the traditional weaving machine. As you can see, the wrapping of the threads need more than one person to roll the threads around a plank. Next come the tedious process called the menyampa, which is to pull the threads singly through the reeds of the beater using a hook. Just this process can take days, as the threading through the reeds are meticulously done by hand and not a single reed can be missed. Additionally, there is a process that is called the menghubung or connecting, which may or may not be used depending on the situation. This step slightly speeds up the production by connecting the individual threads to previous threads already in the warping reed. This is followed by the menegoh or tightening process, which is when the weaver ensures the tautness of the threads for the weaving process to begin. According to Ramtini, each weaver uses their own experience on how much they need to stretch the thread for the weaving process. The next process is the menyongket process, whereby the weaver defines the patterns and motifs to be woven into the fabric. This mathematical process is done by sight and calculated manually with precision. The final quality usually depends on how good the weaver is. The final process is the menenun or weaving stage, which is when the weft thread is inserted between the shed across the warp using the shuttle back and forth. It is then slammed or beaten hard to fix and create the fabric until it's completed. It is refreshing to know that it means the tradition of Songket weaving is now in the hands of a new generation. It is a testament to her talent and efforts that within 7 years from the day she first picked up the craft, she now owns her own Songket factory, her own brand name, and her own showroom. Ramtini is also product of the Sarawak State Government's initiative to ensure that the crafts and traditions of the Malay community are protected, sustained, and promoted. One should also note that owning an authentic and beautiful Sarawak Songket can set you back a few $1,000s. Realizing that the Sarawak Songket can be a viable and commercial venture for young entrepreneurs, the state is assisting the industry as best it can. Deputy State Secretary Datu Dr. Sabariah Putit, herself an advocate of Malay textiles, is one of the main personalities in the effort to bring traditional Sarawak Malay fabrics to the forefront of Sarawak's local crafts scene.
Yeah, before I go in depth into what Songket and Keringkam Sarawak is all about, I believe by now everybody knows and actually are able to define Sarawak as a very unique state, where we have about 40 diverse groups or ethnic groups with diverse culture and traditions. It's very intricate and very unique, and it offers to the rest of the world the uniqueness of Sarawak within the ambit of Borneo Island. So Songket and Keringkam belongs very much to the Malay or Melanau ethnic group, and of course, as we go along earlier, I did mention about my late mom, who is also a Songket weaver, and indeed has raised me up in the culture that is kind of, we are so used to actually embrace the look of the traditional Songket and Keringkam Sarawak with its unique history ever since. Even during the Brooke dynasty, for example, Songket and Keringkam Sarawak has become a piece or a weavery that has been appreciated and recognized since its early years, and because of its uniqueness. Though we came with a common history, but where we are operating, because the Sarawak Malays have a different motifs of their Songket, and of course, between the other motifs in Malaysia, for example, Songket Pahang, Songket Terengganu or Kelantan, the Songket Sarawak has been unique in the sense that it has, you can see both sides are clearly defined. It's clean sheet. You can feel the kind of texture where it's hand woven for both sides. You are able to see both sides in a very clear, distinct motifs, which are unique to the state as well, Sarawak Songket, which differentiate it from the rest of the Songket from other parts of the world or other parts of Malaysia. In fact, even in terms of color scheme, that's also another unique, because it has a shade where it can differentiate, oh, that's Sarawak Songket when someone uses it. It's just like the Sarawak Puak Kumbu. It has a specific color, specific design that differentiate it from other textile, the same similar textile from other parts of the world. So that distinct differentiation make it very unique. And in fact, I very much personally and our team feels that there is a need for us to actually promote that motif so that we can sell Sarawak to the rest of the world.
As part of the state's effort to preserve the legacy of the Malay fabrics, the new Songket and Keringkam Gallery in Kuching was launched in 2020. The gallery was created as part of Sarawak's aspirations to preserve this local Malay heritage. The gallery has a compact exhibit of the Songket and Keringkam history, including showing visitors the precious materials that are required to make and produce the fabrics. Visitors can view and even purchase the fabrics at the gallery, which is just walking distance from the Kuching city's Padang Merdeka. In an entry in her journals, the late Rani of Sarawak, Margaret Brooke, wrote, "I was taken aback by the charming sight of that awaited me as I entered the dining hall. The rows of women and young girls seated on the floor round the room with their silken brocades and gauzy veils of rose, blue, green and lilac reminded me of an animated bed of brightly coloured flowers. What she was referring to was the Keringkam fabric mentioned earlier. The Keringkam is a traditional Malay or Melanau shawl or scarf. It is considered to be one of the finest fabrics in the Sarawak Malay tradition. Keringkam is usually paired with the Songket to complete the Malay female dress or attire worn during formal functions and occasions. The luxurious fabric was much adored by the Rani of Sarawak, as most of her official photographs of that day showed her donning the shawl and Songket. While not a dying art, the making of the Keringkam shawl is not a popular skill to learn, as completing a high-quality shawl can take as long as 6 months. There are two basic forms of the Keringkam, the selendang or the selayah, with the former being a shorter version. The Keringkam is made from fine Turkish or Indian cotton and is much similar to the Swiss voile. The finished shawl is made luxurious and valuable because it is embroidered with meters and meters of expensive imported gold threads, thus becoming precious heirlooms in many Malay families. Whilst in the past, the Keringkam was a product of the fine craftsmanship of Sarawak women from the Malay community, today the trend is changing. Surprisingly, today the craft is being practiced by young Malay men. The difficult art of Keringkam embroidery is being championed by these young craftsmen who are slowly making a name for themselves in Sarawak by producing fabulous and intricate high-quality Keringkams for the market. Danny, who is a full-time teacher, is one of Sarawak's most well-known new generation of Keringkam makers.
Apabila saya melihat Keringkam, saya tertarik dengan keindahan seni itu. Jadi itulah membuatkan saya terlibat dalam dunia sulam Keringkam ini. Saya jadikan sebagai hobi. Selepas sebagai hobi, banyak juga rakan-rakan yang berminat untuk melihat hasil kerja saya dan ada yang menempah. Bermula daripada situlah bermulanya kerjaya saya juga sebagai seorang tukang sulam.
Whilst not a full-time Keringkam maker, his part-time hobby can produce a single Keringkam that is worth more than $5,000 per piece. Even though the popularity of the Sarawak traditional textiles and fabrics is constant, there is a concern that the future generation might not appreciate these fabrics and feel that it does not fit their fashion needs. The method of embroidering a Keringkam shawl is simple yet difficult. Whilst the design of the shawl depends on the creativity of the artist, the price of the complete cloth is based on how intricate these designs are and how much gold thread were used. Danny shows us how it is usually produced. First, one must have proper utensils to make the shawl, including the cloth, which most locals refer to as kasa rubia. The fabric frame is a must. One needs to properly place the fabric across the frame. One of the most important tools in making the shawl is a special 2-wide needle, which is a flat needle unlike a normal needle. Once the gold thread is properly inserted and threaded, all that is left is for the artist to start embroidering with whatever design or motifs that is inspired by him or her.
Ini adalah kita panggil tika selunsung. Ianya amat penting sekali di dalam upacara adat perkahwinan Melayu Sarawak. Ini adalah tika pandan yang digulungkan, selepas itu digulungkan lagi dengan keringkam. Ianya akan diberi kepada pengantin lelaki, menandakan bahawa pengantin perempuan sudah bersedia untuk adat persandingan. Saya nak cakap keringkam ni begitu halus sekali seninya dan memerlukan kesabaran. Di situlah kita perlukan anak-anak muda untuk menyambut ilmu ini, untuk diteruskan pada masa akan datang. Disebabkan 4-5 tahun ni memang hanya tinggal penyulam-penyulam yang sudah tua dan ada segelintir yang sudah tidak mampu lagi untuk menyulam keringkam.
Therefore, efforts by the young Sarawak fashion designers to promote and incorporate these traditional fabrics into a contemporary design has become the norm. One of these up-and-coming Sarawak fashion designers, Harizan, is hoping that his designs, that are both the Sarawak Songket and Keringkam fabrics, will break this barrier and introduce the fabric and his new designs to the younger generation.
I think I want to have Keringkam aesthetic in my design. I would love to put the element in a design, the Keringkam element or Songket element, just a little element detailing on my designs. Because I do believe if you wear one whole piece of Keringkam set or Gajah Holeng, we call it, that's a costume for our Malay culture here in Sarawak. It can only be worn during occasion, during events. So my vision and my mission towards Songket and Keringkam, I want to create a ready-to-wear design based on Keringkam and Songket element.
The Sarawak Songket, along with the Keringkam, are cultural treasures that should be appreciated by the world. With designers like Harizan and along with many others, the Sarawak Songket and the Keringkam shawl can be a new global fabric that can turn heads at international beauty pageants and fashion catwalks.
You don't see that because even in terms of naming, actually in Sarawak they call it Keringkam. In other parts of Malaysia, they call it Keringkam or whatever it is. So there's a differentiation in terms of its pronunciation as well, but not just that. In fact, the motifs. This piece is about more than 50 years. And if you can see the intricate work of the weavers, of the master weavers, does reflect the kind of mastery into each piece. So that's why, as I said, these are traditions that's worth not just propagating, but the government will definitely intervene to ensure the necessary ecosystem is being in place so that this piece can become a showcase, not just showcase to the rest of the world, but it can become a commercial part of the society, communities, and in a way we're helping the local communities like any other arts and crafts of the other parts of the world should be able to improves the socio-economy of our local communities.
From a small Malay village like Gedong in Sarawak, the exquisite Sarawak Songket and the Keringkam fabric are destined to become one of Sarawak's most visible cultural heritage worldwide.